Hey there, I'm Josh. It's been a bit since I put out a video, but I've been really busy working on a bunch of different projects. One of them is a huge upgrade to our laundry room. Let me show you what I mean. Ever since we moved into our house, our laundry room has been a complete disaster. All we have for storage space is a couple cheap wire shelves and a little shelving unit that we brought with us from our first house. We made the best of it for as long as we could, but we were in definite need of an upgrade. So, we got to work removing everything from the room, so we'd have a nice blank canvas to work from. The only things we left in the room were the washer and dryer, because we still need to have a functional household. And there would have been a little more footage here, but the camera stopped recording for some reason. Anyway, with everything stripped off the walls, I went ahead and filled in all the holes that were left over from all the hardware that was holding up the shelves and the ironing board and everything. I let everything dry and then sanded it nice and smooth before moving on to painting. The ceiling got white paint, but we went with gray for the walls. And this is simply because we had a lot left over from doing other rooms of the house. Plus, I just kind of like the color. One thing that I installed but forgot to film was a new lighting fixture. I wanted something super bright, and this thing doesn't disappoint. Alright, enough with the painting. Let's move down to the shop to get started working with some wood. The first thing to do was to break down all the sheets of plywood into the correct sizes for all the shelving components. The table saw always does quick work of that, while the crosscut sled always makes it easy to ensure that I get precise square cuts down to all the correct lengths. Next, I shifted the blade angle to 45 degrees and began to rip down strips that I'll be using as cleats. And that's because these shelves are going to be installed using a French cleat system. I really can't say enough good things about French cleat shelves. They're strong, they're sturdy, they're pretty inexpensive, and I think they look pretty good too. With that done, I got to work cutting out all the shelf brackets. And to do that, I first cut one out to act as a template. Then I used some double back tape to stick it onto the board. And then used the flush trim bit in the router to cut every bracket exactly the same. Well, relatively anyway. There are actually 3 different sizes of shelves that I'm going to be using. But you'll see that here in a moment. In the meantime, I popped in the roundover bit to round off all the exposed edges of both the brackets and all the shelf components. This gives it a nice clean finish, but also adds a little comfort for whenever you inevitably bang your head into a shelf. By the way, for this next part, I hope you don't get motion sickness, because it might be a little rough. I decided to film this entire video using my little action camera, and by golly, I was going to get full use of it. But sorry if you got a little queasy there. The rough part's over. So for these funky looking little pieces, these are actually shelf brackets that are also going to hold some drying bars. I made some marks at where I wanted to drill some holes for the rods, and then I used a Forstner bit to do so. Since these brackets are going to be used in a specific location, I made some marks on the appropriate shelf. This allowed me to get a measurement for the exact length that I would need to cut the dowel rods down to size. The assembly of the drying rack was pretty simple. I just applied some glue into the holes, shoved the dowel rods into place, and then used a clamp to squeeze everything together. For the next part of the assembly, I attached a cleat to the back side of these brackets. And to do that, I first applied some glue, then drilled some pilot holes, and then drove in some screws to make everything secure. To attach the rest of the cleats to the rest of the shelf brackets, I made this nice little jig to make it a little easier. This certainly helped to improve efficiency and to ensure everything was uniform. Now, even though these screws are self-tapping, it's always a good idea to pre-drill the holes before driving in the screws. This helps to prevent any splitting in the wood. For the next part of the assembly, I made another jig to attach the shelf onto the cleat and brackets. To attach the shelf, I applied a bead of glue on top of everything, laid the shelf into place, and then used a brad nailer to secure everything. I then repeated that process a bunch of more times to assemble the rest of the shelves. And here they are, all laid out. I was pretty happy with this project up to this point because everything was coming together pretty much how I was thinking it would. Since I decided to apply the polyurethane by spraying it on, I took full advantage of the beautiful weather outside to do so. Full disclosure, I actually shot this footage in July of 2024. That's why the weather actually looks nice, not like it is right now. And being that it was July, and I am dressed in coveralls, you can be sure that I was sweating my butt off during this. I'm pretty sure I lost a few pounds working on this, but don't worry, I found them again. Anyway, spraying the polyurethane onto everything worked really well, and I'm sure it was a lot faster than trying to apply it by brushing or wiping it on. Even though I'm sure there's a lot more waste doing it this way than the other ways. Regardless, with the poly done, now it was time to start installing the shelves. To do this, I marked where each cleat was going to be mounted, then carefully found the location of the center of each stud in the wall. I did this by finding the rough location, and then drilling some small pilot holes. This was to ensure that each shelf was mounted secure and solid to the wall, and didn't come toppling down on someone at random. Well, for some reason, the media file got corrupted in the camera, and I didn't know at the time how to recover it, so I lost a bunch of footage. Regardless, I got a couple shelves mounted, and everything was coming together really nicely. To mount each cleat, I marked the locations for the screws to the corresponding studs that they would be hitting. Then I just got them all started into the board. To mount the cleats, I'm using cabinet screws, which have a wider washer-type head and a higher shear strength than regular screws. Another thing that I did, which isn't typical for most French cleat-style shelves, was to drive in more screws through the back of each shelf itself. This probably wasn't necessary, but it made me feel a little bit better that everything was a little more secure. And another thing, for some of these shelves, I actually had to shim out the back of the cleat a little bit because the wall wasn't perfectly straight. Not a huge deal, but worth noting. Now for these narrow shelves that I'm getting ready to install here, I made them a little smaller to accommodate the opening of the door going into the laundry room, which, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have made some to go the whole way across the wall. Because we ended up not reinstalling the door at all, which you'll see why here in my next video. The last thing to do was to set these little shelves into place, and then to load them all up, and this project was pretty much done. We are beyond thrilled with how this room has turned out. It's been such a blessing to have all this extra storage space for everything. Not to mention just having everything actually be organized for a change. And since the installation, we've actually changed things up a little bit, but it's just really nice to have the freedom and the room to do so. Overall, it's been a huge upgrade to this room and our home. And it's certainly a far cry from how it used to look. I had a lot of fun working on this project, and even though it was a ton of work, I think the results speak for themselves. It's really made things a lot easier and more organized for us, and we couldn't be happier with how it turned out. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I have some more videos coming up, and hopefully it won't be as long of a wait as it was between this one and the last one. But we'll see how that goes. For now though, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.